Chapter 9. Missing Children. Would the plane stop in time? Mr. Vega was trying desperately to bring it to a halt short of the arroyo. The children held their breath and clutched one another. The plane slowed down at the lip of the deep gully, but the right front wheel slid over the edge. The plane teetered precariously for a few seconds, then stood still. "Thank goodness," Mr. Vega whispered prayerfully. Aloud, he said, "Don't move, any of you, until I give the word. Any sudden movement may tip us over. Diego, crawl out the emergency door in the rear and hang on to the tail. Then we'll follow you." The children sat still while Diego inched his way toward the rear of the plane. In a few moments he had unlocked the small door. He squeezed through. Then, grasping the tail with both hands, he hung from it. "Okay," he yelled. One by one, Mr. Vega had the children crawl out slowly, then followed himself. "I'm very sorry to have given you all such a fright," he said. "It wasn't your fault," Holly spoke up. "It was the Dogies." "What's a Dogie?" Sue asked, perplexed. Dolores explained it's a little orphan calf. Sometimes they wander away from their mothers and get lost on the range. "Then what happens?" Holly queried, worried about the one they had nearly run down. "Sometimes they die from thirst or are attacked by mountain lions," Dolores replied. "Oh, I hope we can find that Dogie again and take it to its mother," Sue spoke up. Meanwhile, Mr. Vega and the boys had started to examine the plane. The right front wheel was out of alignment, and the propeller was broken. "The plane can't fly with a broken propeller, can it?" Ricky asked. "That's right," Mr. Vega answered. "Then how are we going to get home?" the boy asked. "If we can fix the wheel, Dad," Diego spoke up, "couldn't we taxi back to the ranch house?" "It's possible, son, but we might have to cut a path in places." "We might try it, though." Mr. Vega went to the edge of the arroyo and looked at the wheel. "First of all," he said, "we'll have to get that wheel back on level ground. Suppose all of you but Sue and Holly come and help me." As the other children pulled and tugged at the plane, the two little girls walked away. Sue kept glancing around anxiously, and to her sister's surprise, tears began to roll down her face. "What's the matter?" Holly asked her. "That poor lost Dogie," Sue said. "We must find it before a lion or something gets it. Come on, let's hunt for it. Will you help me, Holly?" "Of course," Holly said, giving the smaller girl a hug. "Did you see which way it went?" Sue pointed to where she had seen the animal disappear over a knoll of high pinyon bushes and rabbit brush. Holly took her sister by the hand, and they walked off in search of the lost Dogie. Back at the edge of the arroyo, Mr. Vega and his helpers were having difficulty dragging the plane out of the gully. At the man's request, Ricky had climbed inside the plane to get 2 strong lassos. Diego took them. Lying down flat on the ground near the rim of the arroyo, he tied the ropes to the right front wheel. "Fine," Mr. Vega said. "Now let's all take hold of these ropes. Then when I count to 3, pull. Ready?" he asked a moment later. "Ready. 1, 2, 3. Tugging with all their might, the children managed to move the plane an inch. "It's coming!" Pete cried. "All right, let's try again," Mr. Vega urged. Again, the 6 of them pulled together. Inch by inch, the wheel came up over the edge of the arroyo until the plane finally rested level. "We made it!" Diego shouted joyously. "Well done, crew," Mr. Vega praised the children, as everyone pushed the plane farther back from the dangerous spot. When it had been wheeled to a good location for taxiing at home, Mr. Vega examined the twisted wheel. He declared this could be remedied in a jiffy, and asked Pete to bring him some tools. "You girls may as well get inside," he said. Pam and Dolores suddenly realized they were the only girls there. Sue and Holly were not in sight. "Holly, Sue, come back! We're going home now," Pam called at the top of her lungs. There was no reply. "Where could they have gone?" the girl murmured, worried. "Maybe they're looking for the Dogie," Dolores suggested. She took up the cry. When the boys realized the little girls were not answering, they shouted loudly. Still, there was no sound from the missing children. "This is a bad place to get lost in," Diego said. "All these arroyos and bushes will make it hard to find them out here." Ricky had wandered off a little way and suddenly yelled, "I see Sue's and Holly's footprints. Come on, let's follow them." Everybody hurried after the boy. The marks the little girls had left were quite clear until they reached a stony arroyo on the other side of the knoll. There the tracks suddenly disappeared. The search continued, however, for 2 hours. By this time, shadows had begun to lengthen. "It'll be dark before long," Pam groaned, frantic with worry. "It gets cold out here on the prairie at night, too," Diego whispered to his sister. Mr. Vega was grim. How could he ever face Mr. and Mrs. Hollister if anything had happened to their little girls? "But I mustn't give up hope," he determined, as dusk settled over the valley. As he stood lost in thought, he wondered what to do next, perhaps notify the police on the plane's radio. Pete came up to him. "Mr. Vega," he said, "have you a flashlight in the plane?" "Yes," he replied. "That might help us find the girls," Pete told him. "A light carries farther than our voices. If we keep flashing it off and on, Holly and Sue will see the beam and come towards it." "A very good idea," Mr. Vega said. The sun had already settled behind the rim of the peak Pete thought was Mystery Mountain, and it grew dark quickly. The searchers hurried back to the plane, where Diego got a large flashlight from the tool compartment. "It's dark enough to start flashing this right now," he said. He flicked it on and off for half an hour. Every once in a while the group would shout, but nothing happened. "May I have the light?" Pete asked. "I have another idea. Maybe the girls ran along the bottom of the arroyo where we lost the footprints." "And we haven't searched there," Diego exclaimed. "Our voices might have carried right over the top." Mr. Vega thought it best if they divided forces. There was a smaller flashlight in the plane, which he said he would keep waving where they were. Ricky, Dolores, and Pam had better stay with him. "And you boys be mighty careful in your search," he insisted. "Keep your eyes and ears open every second. There are plenty of animals roaming around at night." Pete and Diego set off and hurried along the floor of the deep arroyo in a northerly direction. They had gone about a mile when Pete, in the lead and flashing the big light, said excitedly, "Look, ahead there! It might be—" Without finishing the sentence, Pete dashed forward, running pell-mell across the boulders and tough clumps of grass. Suddenly he stopped short and broke into a hearty laugh. Diego, too, chuckled in relief. Before them, nestled on the ground, their heads close together, were Holly and Sue, sound asleep, and between them lay a woolly baby lamb. The laughter awakened the little girls. Looking up into the beam of the flashlight, they rubbed their eyes. "Hi, Pete," Holly said cheerfully, not a bit disturbed at having been lost. "Isn't our lamb adorable?" Sue asked, hugging it. The girls arose. The lamb got up too and bleated a couple of times. "I'll see if it's one of ours," Diego said. He bent over the animal and looked at her ears. On the left one was a daub of red paint. "This lamb is ours, all right," the boy said excitedly. "Where did you find it?" Holly explained that while she and Sue were looking for the Dogie, they had heard the pitiful bleating of the lost lamb in the arroyo. "We called to it," said Sue, "and it came right up to us." "We'd better hurry back to the plane," Pete said. "Can you girls walk, or are you too tired?" "We're all right." Diego suggested that walking would be easier on the ground above the arroyo, and he knew a shortcut that might save a quarter of a mile. Some distance from the plane, Pete began to shout, "We found them! They're all right!" "Oh, that's wonderful," Pam called back, and ran to meet them. There were hugs and kisses. Finally, Mr. Vega's voice could be heard saying, "We must let our families know where we are." "How will we do that?" Ricky asked. "There's a two-way radio in the plane. I can tune it to the police station at sunrise. I hope the set wasn't damaged by our accident." As he walked toward the plane, Pete found a piece of wood and drove it into the ground. Then he tied one of the lassos around the lamb's neck and hitched her to the stake. The other children had followed Mr. Vega into the plane to watch him send the message. He switched on the button and spoke into the microphone. "Calling Sunrise Police. Calling Sunrise Police. This is Frank Vega calling Sunrise Police." The children waited silently. Would the message get through?